35 years. That's how long I worked nights in New Jersey hospitals, sacrificing my body and soul for my children. And at my retirement party, in front of everyone I cared about, they called me worthless. But what they didn't know was that I'd already planned my revenge, and it was about to destroy everything they thought they knew about their mother. If you've ever felt undervalued by the people closest to you, this story will give you chills. Hit that like button if you believe karma comes for those who deserve it, and subscribe, because we're diving deep into the most satisfying revenge story you'll hear today. My name is Debra, and for 35 years I wore scrubs like armor. Not the pretty kind you see on TV shows. Mine were faded from countless washes, stained with the evidence of lives I'd helped save. My feet knew every inch of those hospital corridors in Newark, from the ICU where I held dying hands, to the maternity ward where I welcomed new souls into the world. I was 23 when James left us. Michael was 5, Lisa was 3, and I was pregnant with what would have been our third. The miscarriage came 2 weeks after he walked out, leaving nothing but divorce papers and a note that said I was too focused on everyone else's problems. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who abandoned his family blamed me for caring too much about others. Those early years were brutal. I'd work the night shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., sleep for 3 hours, then wake up to get the kids ready for school. My body existed on coffee and determination. I remember standing in grocery store aisles at 2 a.m. after my shift, comparing prices on cereal boxes while my bones ached with exhaustion. Every penny counted. Every coupon was a small victory. But I never complained. Not once. Because I had something to prove. To James, to the world, but mostly to my children. I would show them that a mother's love could move mountains, that sacrifice had meaning, that hard work created opportunities. I was wrong about so many things. The first sign came when Michael turned 16. I'd saved for months to buy him a used Honda Civic for his birthday. Nothing fancy, but reliable and safe. When I presented him the keys, wrapped in a bow I'd made from ribbon saved from Christmas presents, his face fell like I'd handed him garbage. "This is it," he said, not even trying to hide his disappointment. "William's dad bought him a BMW for his birthday. This looks like something a poor person would drive." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I swallowed my hurt and smiled. "It's reliable, honey. It'll get you where you need to go." "Yeah, to the poor kids section of the school parking lot," he muttered, but he took the keys. Lisa was no better. At 17, she'd started working at a boutique in the mall, and every conversation became about how embarrassing our life was. She'd hide in the car when I picked her up, sliding down in the passenger seat of my beat-up Chevy like she was riding with a criminal. "Mom, why can't you drive something normal?" she'd complain, her voice sharp with teenage venom. "Everyone else's parents have nice cars. You look broke." The thing is, I was broke. Every dollar went to their needs, their wants, their futures. College funds, school trips, prom dresses, sports equipment. I said yes to everything and no to myself. I wore the same winter coat for 8 years. I cut my own hair. I hadn't bought new clothes in so long that my scrubs were practically falling apart. But they didn't see the sacrifice. They saw failure. The grocery store incidents were the worst. I'd perfected the art of couponing, turning it into a strategy that could stretch our food budget for weeks. I had a system, organized by expiration date, store layout, double coupon days. It was mathematical precision born from necessity. But every trip became a humiliation parade. Michael and Lisa would trail behind me in the aisles, rolling their eyes as I compared prices and pulled out my coupon organizer. "Don't embarrass us, Mom," Lisa would hiss under her breath when the cashier took too long processing my coupons. "We're not poor, are we?" The question stung because the answer was complicated. Poor in money? Yes. Poor in love, in sacrifice, in dedication? Never. But they couldn't see the difference. Christmas was always the hardest. I'd spend months planning, saving, searching for deals that would let me give them everything on their lists. I'd work extra shifts, pick up overtime, skip meals to stretch the budget. The joy of giving was the only thing that got me through those brutal December hospital shifts. But the Christmas when Lisa was 19, something inside me cracked. I'd found a beautiful necklace at an estate sale, real silver with a small sapphire pendant. It had cost me 2 weeks of lunch money, but I knew Lisa would love it. It was elegant, timeless, something she could wear for years and think of her mother's love. She opened it on Christmas morning, glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds, then tossed the box aside like it was junk mail. "Next year, don't bother," she said, not even looking at me. "You never give us anything good anyway." The room went silent. Even Michael looked uncomfortable. But Lisa just picked up her phone and started scrolling, dismissing not just the gift, but 35 years of sacrifices she'd never bothered to count. I told myself they'd mature. I told myself that someday they'd understand what I'd given up for them. I told myself that children need time to appreciate their parents. I was wrong about that, too. The years that followed blurred together in a haze of night shifts and quiet disappointments. Michael moved out first, taking a job at a tech company in Manhattan. He'd visit occasionally, usually when he needed something: money for security deposits, help with student loans, a co-signer for his apartment lease. Our conversations had become transactional, reduced to his needs and my willingness to meet them. Lisa stayed closer to home but felt further away than ever. She'd started dating William, a guy whose family owned a chain of car dealerships. Suddenly, our modest life wasn't just embarrassing, it was evidence of my failures as a provider. She'd bring William around for dinner and I'd watch her apologize for our furniture, our neighborhood, our life. "My mom's always worked really hard," she'd say, her tone suggesting this was somehow a character flaw. "She's never been good with money." Never been good with money. The woman who'd stretched every dollar until it screamed. Who'd fed and clothed and housed them on a nurse's salary for 35 years, wasn't good with money. The nights were the hardest. After 12-hour shifts dealing with death and desperation, I'd come home to an empty house and try to understand where I'd gone wrong. I'd raised them to be independent, successful, confident, but somehow I'd failed to raise them to be kind. My coworkers noticed the change in me. Alicia, who'd worked the ICU with me for 15 years, started asking questions when I stopped talking about my children with the same pride I'd once carried. "How are Michael and Lisa?" she'd ask during our break. "Fine," I'd answer, staring into my coffee like it held answers. "Just fine." What could I say? That my son treated me like an ATM? That my daughter was ashamed of the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her future? That I'd worked myself into exhaustion for 35 years, only to discover that my children saw me as a burden rather than a blessing? So I'd just nod and change the subject. The planning for my retirement party should have been exciting. After 3.5 decades of caring for others, I was finally going to rest. The hospital was throwing me a celebration. Colleagues from every department wanted to honor my years of service. Diane from administration had asked if my children would like to say something at the ceremony. "They'd be honored to," I'd said, because that's what a proud mother says about her accomplished children. I spent weeks planning what to wear, how to do my hair, what I'd say in my speech. For the first time in years, I felt like I had something to celebrate. My sacrifice had meant something. I'd helped save lives, comforted families, made a difference in the world. Maybe my children would finally see that too. The weeks leading up to the party, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe this would be the moment when Michael and Lisa recognized what I'd built, what I'd accomplished, what I'd overcome. Maybe they'd finally understand that their mother was someone worth celebrating. I should have known better. The night before the party, Lisa called to ask what she should wear. Not to congratulate me, not to express pride, but to make sure she looked appropriate for the cameras that might be there. Michael texted to confirm the time, adding that he could only stay for an hour because he had dinner plans. Still, I told myself this was progress. They were coming. They were going to be there for me. I was wrong about that too. The retirement party was everything I'd dreamed of and everything I'd feared, all at once. The hospital's main conference room had been decorated with photos from my 35 years of service. Me as a young nurse, fresh-faced and optimistic. Me receiving awards for outstanding patient care. Me mentoring new nurses who'd become my closest friends. My colleagues had filled the room. Alicia gave a speech about how I'd trained half the ICU staff. Dr. Thompson, who'd been my supervisor for 20 years, talked about my dedication and compassion. Doris from the maternity ward told the story of how I'd stayed past my shift to help deliver twins during a blizzard. For 2 hours, I felt like the woman I'd always wanted my children to see. Michael and Lisa arrived fashionably late, just as the formal presentations were ending. Michael wore an expensive suit I'd never seen before, probably something William's family had helped Lisa buy him. Lisa looked stunning in a dress that cost more than I'd spent on clothes in 2 years. They smiled for pictures, made small talk with my coworkers, played the part of the proud children. I began to relax, thinking maybe this would be different. Maybe surrounded by people who valued my work, they'd finally see their mother through different eyes. Then came the speeches. Diane handed the microphone to Michael first. He stood up, confident and polished, looking every inch the successful young man I'd sacrificed to create. "I want to thank you all for honoring my mother tonight," he began, and my heart swelled with pride. "She's definitely dedicated her life to nursing." The pause that followed should have been my warning. "But I have to be honest," he continued, his voice carrying that casual cruelty I'd learned to recognize. "Mom wasn't really a mom. She raised patients, not us." The room went silent. I felt my smile freeze on my face, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was my retirement party. These were my colleagues, my friends, people who respected me, and my son was... what was he doing? But he wasn't finished. Don't get me wrong, she's great with sick people, but when it came to her own kids, we pretty much raised ourselves. I mean, how can you mother your children when you're never home? I heard someone gasp. I think it was Alicia. I caught Dr. Thompson's eye, and his expression was a mixture of confusion and secondhand embarrassment, but I kept smiling, kept clapping, because what else could I do? This was my son. This was supposed to be my moment. Then Lisa took the microphone. She was drunk. I could see it in her glassy eyes, hear it in the slight slur of her words. But drunk or sober, what she said next would haunt me forever. "My brother's being too nice," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Honestly, she's just a lonely old lady who wasted her life in scrubs. She thinks taking care of strangers makes her some kind of hero, but she never learned how to take care of her own family." The silence was deafening. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes on me, watching my reaction, waiting to see how I'd handle this public humiliation. Some of my colleagues looked angry on my behalf, others looked mortified. A few couldn't even meet my eyes. I kept smiling. I kept clapping, because 35 years of being a professional had taught me how to maintain composure under pressure, even when the pressure was my own children systematically destroying me in front of everyone who mattered. "Thank you both," I said when she handed me the microphone. "Thank you for sharing your perspective." I don't remember what else I said. I don't remember the rest of the party. I remember shaking hands and accepting congratulations while feeling like I was drowning. I remember my children leaving early, separately, without saying goodbye. I remember driving home in my beat-up Chevy while my entire world shifted underneath me. That night, sitting in my empty house with the retirement gifts scattered around me, something fundamental changed. For 35 years, I'd operated under the belief that love meant sacrifice, that motherhood meant putting your children's needs before your own, that good parents gave everything and expected nothing in return. But my children had just proven that my love, my sacrifice, my very existence meant nothing to them. Worse than nothing. I was an embarrassment, a failure, a lonely old lady who'd wasted her life. Well, if that's what they thought, maybe it was time to give them exactly what they wanted. A mother who was no longer in their way. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise paint my tiny backyard gold. And I made a decision that would change everything. For 35 years, I'd been playing by rules that my children didn't respect. I'd sacrificed my comfort, my dreams, my future, believing that someday they'd appreciate what I'd given them. But appreciation isn't something you can earn by giving more. It's something you either receive or you don't. And I wasn't receiving it. By Monday morning, I'd called 3 people: my lawyer, a real estate agent, and the financial advisor who'd been trying to get me to diversify my modest savings for years. "I want to sell the house," I told John, the real estate agent who'd sold me the place 22 years ago, "as quickly as possible." "Any particular reason for the rush, Debra? The market's not at its peak right now." "I'm relocating," I said, "to Florida. I want a fresh start." The house sold in 3 weeks. It wasn't worth much, a modest 3-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood, but it was mine, paid off through decades of double shifts and careful budgeting. After closing costs and taxes, I had enough to buy a small condo near the ocean and still have money left over. That's when I made the call that would have made my children's heads spin if they'd known about it. I called the nursing school at Rutgers. "I'd like to establish a scholarship fund," I told the development office, "for single mothers pursuing nursing degrees." "That's wonderful," How much were you thinking of contributing? $200,000. The silence on the other end was worth every penny. That was my savings. 35 years of putting aside $5 here, $10 there, skipping lunches and wearing clothes until they fell apart, and saying no to myself so I could say yes to my children's futures. Money I'd been planning to leave to Michael and Lisa. Money they'd probably expected to inherit. Money that was now going to help women like me, women who worked nights and sacrificed everything for their families, women who deserved to be seen as heroes instead of embarrassments. The scholarship would be called the Debra Memorial Fund for Nursing Excellence. Not because I was dead, but because the version of me that had lived for my children's approval was. I didn't tell them about the house sale. I didn't mention the move. I simply packed my life into boxes, hired a moving company, and disappeared from the life I'd built around their needs. The condo in Sarasota was small but perfect. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a balcony that faced the Gulf of Mexico. I furnished it with things I liked, not hand-me-downs or practical choices, but furniture that made me happy. I bought art for the walls, plants for the balcony, books I'd always wanted to read. For the first time in 35 years, I was living for myself. The call came 3 weeks after I'd settled in. "Mom?" Michael's voice was strained, confused. "I went by your house. There's a for sale sign, but it says sold. What's going on?" I was sitting on my balcony, watching dolphins play in the surf, drinking coffee that cost more per pound than I'd ever allowed myself before. "I moved," I said simply. "Moved? Where? Why didn't you tell us?" "I moved to Florida. And I didn't tell you because you've made it clear that my life decisions are not your concern." "What are you talking about? Of course they're our concern. You're our mother." The word mother hung in the air between us, weighted with 35 years of history and 3 weeks of careful reconsideration. "Am I?" I asked, "because at my retirement party you made it very clear that I was never really a mother to you. You said I raised patients, not children, so I thought I'd give you what you wanted, a life without the lonely old lady who wasted her life in scrubs." "Mom, come on, it was a party, we were trying to be funny." "Funny?" I repeated the word like it was a foreign language. "You thought humiliating me in front of my colleagues was funny." The silence stretched between us until he cleared his throat. "Look, maybe we could have been more tactful, but you can't just disappear. What if we need you?" And there it was, the truth underneath all the years of dismissal and disrespect. They didn't love me, but they needed me. They needed my bank account, my babysitting services, my willingness to solve their problems and clean up their mistakes. "Need me for what, Michael?" "Well, I mean, Lisa's getting married next year, she'll need help with the wedding, and I'm looking at buying a house. I was hoping you might co-sign the loan." I started laughing, not the bitter laugh of a broken woman, but the genuine amusement of someone who'd finally seen the joke. "You want me to co-sign a loan for you? After you publicly announced that I was never really a mother to you?" That's different. That was personal. This is business." "No, Michael, there are consequences." Lisa called 2 days later, her voice shrill with panic. "Mom, what the hell is wrong with you? Michael said you moved to Florida without telling us, and you sold the house? What about our stuff in the basement? What about family Christmas? What about respect?" I countered. "What about the 35 years I spent working myself into exhaustion for your futures? What about the fact that you called me a lonely old lady who wasted her life?" "I was drunk. People say stupid things when they're drunk." "Drunk words are sober thoughts, Lisa. You said exactly what you've always thought about me." "That's not... Look, maybe I was harsh, but you're being dramatic. You can't just cut us off because your feelings got hurt." "I'm not cutting you off. I'm simply choosing to live the life you've always said I should have lived, one focused on myself instead of on children who see me as a burden." "We don't see you as a burden." "Then why have you spent the last 15 years telling me I wasn't good enough? Why have you been ashamed of everything I've worked for? Why have you treated every sacrifice I made like it was a personal failing?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "When William and I get married," she said finally, her voice small and desperate, "we're going to need help with the down payment on a house. We were counting on you. You were counting on the lonely old lady who wasted her life in scrubs." "Mom, please." "Please what, Lisa? Please continue to fund the lifestyle of a daughter who's ashamed of me? Please keep sacrificing so you can keep talking?" "It's not like that. It's exactly like that. And I'm done." That was 6 months ago. 6 months of mornings that begin with coffee on my balcony, watching the sun rise over water that stretches to the horizon. 6 months of reading books, taking walks, volunteering at the local animal shelter, making friends with neighbors who see me as Debra, the interesting woman who moved here from New Jersey, not Debra, the walking ATM. I've learned to paint watercolors. I've joined a book club. I've started dating a retired teacher named Joseph who thinks my nursing stories are fascinating, rather than evidence of misplaced priorities. He brings me flowers and opens doors and tells me I'm remarkable. It's been 35 years since someone told me I was remarkable. The calls from my children have become less frequent and more desperate. Michael's loan application was denied without a co-signer. Lisa's wedding planning has hit financial roadblocks. They've both tried guilt, anger, bargaining, and threats. None of it works anymore. Last week, Lisa sent me a long email detailing everything I was destroying by my selfishness. Their futures, their relationships, their financial stability. She ended by saying I was the worst mother in the world, that I'd ruined their lives, that they'd never forgive me. I printed the email and put it on my refrigerator, next to a photo of the dolphins I see every morning, and a thank you note from the first recipient of my nursing scholarship, a single mother of 3 who's starting her 2nd year at Rutgers. My children spent 35 years teaching me that I didn't matter. It took me 6 months to learn that they were wrong. I matter to the women who will become nurses because of my scholarship. I matter to Joseph, who holds my hand during sunset walks on the beach. I matter to the dogs at the shelter who wag their tails when they see me coming. I matter to the book club ladies who argue with me about character motivations and save my seat every Tuesday. Most importantly, I matter to myself. This morning, as I sit on my balcony, watching the dolphins play in the surf, I realize something profound. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt or disappointed or desperate for their approval. I'm simply free. Free from the exhausting cycle of giving everything and receiving nothing. Free from the constant ache of loving people who see that love as weakness. Free from the woman who worked herself into the ground, believing that sacrifice alone would earn her children's respect. My phone buzzes with another text from Michael, probably another plea disguised as an emergency. I glance at it, then set the phone aside and take another sip of my coffee. The sun is painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The dolphins are dancing in the waves. My coffee is perfect. My morning is peaceful. And my life, finally, after 35 years, is my own. They wanted a mother who wasn't in their way. They got exactly what they asked for. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't hurting someone back, it's finally choosing yourself. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and tell me in the comments about a time when you had to put yourself first. Subscribe for more stories about justice, karma, and the power of knowing your worth. Because sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well.